All right, let's get this party started. Nothing to wait for, no time like the present for the Panthers Insider Show. Not Panthers Insider Show. What am I talking about? That's a terrible way to start a live program, by calling it the wrong name. This is not the Panthers Insider Show. The Panthers Insider Show is on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan on Saturdays, usually Saturday mornings, usually at 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings, sometimes at 10 a.m. on Saturday mornings, sometimes at post-Pirates game on Saturday nights. We moved that thing around quite a bit. I think it's back to 8 a.m. this week. I'll have to double-check on that. I should have double-checked on that before we started tonight's podcast. But then again, I didn't think that I would introduce tonight's podcast as the Panthers Insider Show. So that was an unexpected delight. Welcome to the Panther-Lair Show. Let's try that one. The Panther-Lair Show here, live on Tuesday nights at 8:30 every week on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, the podcast you can listen to throughout the week. We appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast throughout the week. Know we get a lot of listens there, see the numbers. And then, of course, we know we get a lot of people tuning in on the live stream on Tuesday nights at 8:30. And I always say the fun thing about doing these live streams, and I really do always say it. We've been doing this for about a year now, but I feel like I want to keep emphasizing this point because I think there are people who probably listen to the podcast on Thursday or Friday, but don't usually tune into the live stream on Tuesday night, which goes 8:30 to 9:30. We usually plug out an hour or so. And I feel like there are people who listen to the podcast but don't tune into the live stream, but they should, because you're missing out, because we have a lot of fun. We have a good conversation, and the fun thing about it is there can be some back and forth. There can be some interaction, some conversation, questions, answers, comments. I say something that you disagree with, tell me, and let's talk about it. You have a question about something, tell me, let's talk about it. Look, right now, it's the first week of April. The college basketball season is over. Pitt football is holding spring camp, but even when we used to see, every minute of every practice in spring camp, we still didn't really know what to expect out of the team. And certainly this year, where we've seen 0 minutes of any practices so far, we know even less of what to expect out of the team. So it's a unique time right now, and sometimes it's interesting when you're trying to find things to talk about and find things to write about. It helps to have somebody ask a question, say, hey, I was wondering about this. What's the backup right guard situation look like? Well, that's what you can do here in the Panther-Lair Show live stream every Tuesday night at 8:30. You can get in on the conversation. And I actually put out a call for questions on the Panther-Lair.com message boards. I put out a call saying, hey, what do you guys want to talk about? What's on your mind? What questions do you have? And so we got a lot of great questions there. We're going to get into those and kind of run through those and have some conversation there about Pitt football, Pitt basketball, and Pitt recruiting. But, of course, if you're interested in any of those topics, you need to go to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. I don't think anybody covers Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting better than us. I think you find a ton of coverage there. Just today, on Tuesday, we had some recruiting coverage, kind of breaking down some of Pitt's top cornerback prospects in the 2022 recruiting class. We had football team coverage with some conversations with Pat Narduzzi. He held his weekly press conference, I guess is what it's working out to be, a weekly sit down with the media over Zoom, of course. And so we had coverage from that. We had basketball team coverage. Our guy Steven Gertz, who does a great job breaking down film on the basketball team. He put together some of his highlights from the season. Some of the things that really stood out to him, the one shining moments is what he called them. Pitt's one shining moment. And it was really interesting stuff that he broke down with Femi Odikali and Ethio Horton, even, and Justin Champagny. So some great basketball team coverage there. And, of course, lots of conversation on the Panther-Lair.com message boards about basketball recruiting, both in the transfer portal and high school guys, because both of those are of high interest right now for Pitt. And so it's all right there at Panther-Lair. We had baseball coverage today, too, because the Panthers wrapped up a series against Notre Dame kind of over the weekend. It went Saturday to Monday as opposed to the traditional Friday to Sunday. But we had some baseball coverage there as well. So lots of stuff to check out on Panther-Lair.com. If you're a Pitt fan, it's the website you need to go to, for the coverage and for the conversation, because the message boards are always lively and always active. There's always something being talked about Panther-Lair.com. So you want to go check that website out. And then, of course, we have to give a shout out to our friends at Home Field. You can see I've got the shirt on, the retro rock look, the Pittsburgh Panthers shirt. Super comfortable, super soft, great fit, holds its shape. This is just a great t-shirt. This is a great product at Home Field. You need to go check those guys out. We've had discounts. We've had some promos. We run with them. We hope to run more and give you opportunities to get great gear at a discounted rate. But I mean, this stuff is worth paying full price. They have, their logos, their graphics, their designs are inspired by the school history. They're very active on social media. I think they take a lot of their cues from the fan bases on social media. So, I mean, it really is the kind of thing that fans would want to wear. And it's a high-quality product on top of that. So, I mean, you really kind of, you hit both ends of it. You have a well-rounded game. You're a two-way player with high-quality product and great designs. That's what you find at Home Field. So go to their website, homefieldapparel.com. Check out their Pitt collection. It's great. I mean, it's great stuff. I'm a big fan of it. So you want to go check them out. And they support us. You know what I mean? They support the podcast. And so you should support them because they make a good product. They really do. Great Pitt stuff. Great stuff from a lot of colleges. So what's been going on? What's been happening with Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting? I was going to make a joke with Pitt basketball. I was going to hold up a notepad and it said, here's the biggest news out of Pitt basketball recruiting right now, and it was just going to be an empty page because that's sort of what's going on. Pitt has nothing happening yet. You know what I mean? Nothing has happened. Nothing's gone down. And it's all just a waiting game. And that can be frustrating. And I understand it's frustrating for Pitt fans to wait. And you know what? I'm not going to go down the same path again that we've done the last couple of weeks of preaching patience. I mean, it's still the case. It's still the case. The season's not starting. They haven't settled for a bunch of their, fourth and fifth tier targets. There are still 1,000 guys out there in the transfer portal. And even if all those guys can't play in the ACC, even if they're not all ACC caliber players, enough guys in the transfer portal are ACC caliber that Pitt should be able to get a few. And they need a few. And I think they will take a few. And it's just a question of who they are and how good they are and how well they fit in. And I don't even think, something that gets brought up often is sort of looking at, look at Eric Hamilton, look at Nike Sabandi for what he was for most of the season prior to the last few games. Look at Ethiel Horton, look at Sidi Nadir. You look at this sort of, look at Ryan Murphy, and you can run down this sort of long list of transfers who have come to Pitt and not really made a big impact, not really done a lot at Pitt. And I see that get brought up as sort of with the idea that these are the kind of guys that Pitt is going to get. And I don't entirely agree with that. I don't think you can judge or project how Pitt's going to do in the transfer portal this year based on how they've done with transfers in the past, simply because this is uncharted territory this year. There's never been a year like this before. There's never been this many transfers available. There's never been this many high quality, high level transfers. Guys who are transferring, you say, you had a starting job. You had a starting job in a high major conference. You had a starting job in a mid-major conference. Why are you transferring? Where are you going? There's never been this many guys out there to get. And so, Pitt's history with transfers, not a lot of real big impact guys. I think Nike Sabandi has a chance to be really good. I think Ethiel Horton can still develop into a really solid contributor. But they haven't gotten, the kind of guys that you want to round out your starting lineup with, historically. But this is not history. What's happening right now has never happened. And because of that, we've seen Pitt in situations where they need to fill a ton of spaces. That has happened. That happened in that, Kevin Stallings' second year. And he was filling in the holes, and he got some good players in that situation. That's not what I mean when I say this has never happened. When I'm talking about when this has never happened, there's never been this volume and this quality of transfers available all over the place. It literally is. It's an open market. It's free agency, as it's been described. And there are a ton of guys out there for a team and a school to fill out their roster. And I see people also saying, oh, look, they're going after transfers. That's desperation. You don't want to be in a position where you have to fill out your roster with transfers. Well, no, you don't. That's right. But you also, this is not the typical kind of year. You know what I mean? This is not what it has been in the past. There really are enough options that you can fill out your roster and fill out your starting rotation with those guys. And it's not necessarily desperation. It's just kind of a reality of the situation sort of thing. And a lot of schools are doing it. And I think that's probably the other point that should be made. It's been apparent for weeks now that transfers are not just impacting Pitt, and you can look across the country and see the teams that are losing guys and losing transfers, and where it's not just Pitt losing all these players, and some schools that have had a high number of transfers, it's due to coaching changes, and some schools it's just guys are just leaving. I mean, look, Syracuse has had how many? I think I saw something, Carolina is losing transfers. Wake Forest has lost a ton of transfers. Virginia has a bunch of guys going. This is not unique to Pitt. It's not necessarily a symptom of some larger problem in the program. It's just what's happening this year. And I don't even know if it's going to happen next year on a large scale. You know what I mean? On the national scale. I don't know if next offseason, next spring is going to be like what this one has been. There's part of me that thinks things have been so screwed up over the last year that this is sort of residual from that. And there have been different theories tossed around about the connection between the COVID year and guys transferring and how one might tie into the other. I don't entirely know how much of that I buy, but I do think it's such a unique year that it's not surprising that we've got a unique result this spring. And the result is that a ton of guys are transferring. And so none of this is to say, I'm going down the patience thing again. None of this is to say that I'm sitting here proclaiming Pitt's offseason to be a success. I'm not. I'm not even sitting here projecting Pitt's offseason to be a success. I don't know what Pitt's offseason is going to be. Maybe this was my biggest theme from the last week, is the whole I don't know and you don't know thing. We don't know, right? We don't know what this roster is going to look like 3 months from now. When we find out, then we can render some judgments. But until then, I'm willing to at least wait and see what happens for Pitt and how they fill out their roster. One of the big dates coming up, April 15th. This is the big one. Efton Reed, 5-star center. He's at IMG Academy. He's going to make his commitment. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't. This is the wildest thing. It's if you're not following along, 5-star center, one of the top available recruits in the country. Highly considering Pitt. Pitt is one of his finalists. Ohio State's in there. I think LSU is in there. I forget some of the other schools. There's been so many top lists announced for different recruits and transfers that it's LSU seems to be one of them all the time. LSU seems to always be in the mix. But otherwise, I mean, it's hard to keep track of all the top lists. But this is a big one for Pitt. This is a big-time target. We know the need at the center position. We know how much of a need this program has had for a long time at the center position. And we know how much this current roster needs at the center position, particularly after Terrell Brown graduates and decides to transfer, but I don't think they ever anticipated him being back. But then Abdul Kareem Coulibaly goes into the transfer portal. John Hughley's legal situation is still looming. You don't know what's going to happen there. And I don't think they can really operate on the assumption that he is coming back. If anything, if they're going to operate on any assumption, they should operate on the assumption that he's leaving. Or I shouldn't say leaving, that he's not going to be coming back. Just because you don't know how the legal system's going to work out, but there were a lot of charges there. Filed against John Hughley. And so, you're left with really nothing at the center position. I guess Max Madison is the center on your roster now. So you need to bring in, we've talked about this. You need to bring in a transfer and a high school kid would be your ideal situation, and maybe a couple, the best case scenario would be getting a veteran transfer center, somebody who has experience and has succeeded and excelled, at the least at the mid-major level and maybe at the high-major level if you can find one, and then bringing in Efton Reed to go with him, getting a five-star big man, a big-time contributor. But I don't know what's going to happen. And like I said, I put a call out for questions on the Panther-Lair.com message boards, just saying, hey, what do you want to talk about? What's on your mind? What questions you have? And there were a few questions in there from people asking about the asking about Efton Reed, like Rhino 527. Will Pitt fans be happy April 15th? There was another one too. Thought there was another one. I thought somebody else asked about Efton Reed. Oh, there was on Twitter, because I put it out there on Twitter as well, and some people said, "Oh, what's going to happen with Efton Reed?" And here's the reality of it. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with Efton Reed. And I don't know if anyone knows. I mean, maybe he knows. Maybe his mom knows. She seems heavily involved in his recruitment. I don't know if his coaches know. I don't know if anyone knows. I don't know if the college coaches know. Efton Reed his recruitment has been one of the quietest and almost strangest that I've seen for a big-time prospect in a long time, where just nobody has anything on this guy. And that's us at Rivals, and that's all the other people who cover college basketball nationally. When I look around, nobody's really got anything. And I mean, we keep trying to work on different different angles and try and find different sources. And what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And people have guesses. People have hunches. People have their gut feeling or their instinct. Nobody's really got actionable info here. And it's weird because, if it's some obscure kid, it might be harder to track down. But this is a guy, a 5-star prospect, a big-time center, one of the best players in the country, one of the best players in the class of 2021, playing in IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, one of the biggest schools, nationally. And nobody has any idea. There's just nothing out there. And so people keep asking, what's going to happen? Is Pitt going to get Reed? Is Pitt going to get Reed? Nobody knows. And, we've got 9 more days as of tonight. On Tuesday night, we've got 9 more days until we find out for sure. By the time you listen to this podcast, it might be down to a week, but nobody knows. And so we just all kind of have to wait and find out what's going to happen on April 15th. It's going to be a long wait, but it's just kind of what the situation is here. Let's get to a couple of the questions here in the live stream before we get to the questions from the message board. S-Mac said, what happened last Saturday morning? He's asking about the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan, which I initially introduced this podcast as being, we got bumped, pushed back till the end of the day. It was after the Pirates game. It was unfortunate that I didn't know that was going to happen. I talked about it here on the Panther-Lair Show. I said, tune in Saturday morning, 8 a.m. We'll be on. And we got pushed back until after the Pirates game, so I don't think the show started until around 7 or a little after, somewhere around there. I'll double check and make sure I tweet out our start time this week. But I assume we're back to the 8 a.m. start, but I will double check on that. Matthew Whalen says, going to mention the elephant in the room. Last week you mentioned if Efton Reed decides to go to college, I think Pitt has a good chance. It seems like the pro route is gone, so do you still feel that way? Pitt, okay, you're right. So, it looks like he's most likely going to college. I mean, because that was kind of getting debated, going back and forth. I think for a long time, Pitt has been in really strong shape with Efton Reed. Pitt has been, it has looked like a favorite for him for a long time. But other schools have always still sort of been involved. And he's still a very high-end prospect who is sitting out there, waiting to be found or waiting to be signed. You know what I mean? And other schools are interested. Other good schools, Ohio State, LSU. I mean, these are good programs that Pitt's going to have to do battle with. And quite frankly, once in a while, Jeff Capel's going to have to win one of these recruiting battles if he really wants to get the program moving forward. If he really wants the program to turn around and take a big step forward, he's going to have to win a few of these recruiting battles. And that's in the high school ranks, and that's in the transfer portal as well. You can't just rely on beating out whoever, low end schools. You can't just rely on beating out George Washington. You've got to be able to every now and then beat out high major schools for a recruit and for a transfer. And I think as the success comes, I think that'll get easier for Jeff Capel. I think he'll be able to pull that off more, more effectively and more consistently. But it's hard to do when you're not having that success, and then it becomes just a matter of recruiting ability. You need to be able to close the deal every now and then. You've got to be able to get those guys. And that's the situation Capel's in right now with Reed. And Reed, I think, really, if Pitt could get him to commit, it would be one of the bigger developments in the Jeff Capel era, both for what it means for the on-court product and what it means sort of off the court, of having a guy of Reed's stature buy into what Capel is selling. You know what I mean? Buy into what Capel is doing. And it would be huge. Do I still feel confident? I don't know. Kind of like I said, Matt. I mean, or Matthew. I don't know what you prefer to go by, but kind of like I said, it's tough to read. That was a bad choice of words, but it's tough to get a real feel for because it's been so quiet and there's so little real info out there on Reed. Other than for the longest time, Pitt was in pretty good shape for him, really good shape. Maybe even one of the, maybe the favorite, but we'll see how it develops. We'll see what comes out in the next 9 days. Colin Towle has a football question. Is this the best offense Pat Narduzzi has had at Pitt? Tons of wide receivers, the running back potential, O-line experience, and Kenny Pickett is back. Should be one of the better ones since the 2016 season. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously in terms of coaching with Matt Canada, 2016 stands out. And I think the personnel stands out in 2016 as well. I feel like when we look back on the 2016 offense and how good it was and how effective it was, we talk a whole lot about Matt Canada and how good he was at play calling, play design, and all setting things up. And I mean, he was great at it. But the thing that offense had, it was really precise on a lot of levels. It operated, it was very detail oriented, and it operated with a lot of precision. And I think you need certain caliber of players to do that. You need a quarterback like Nate Peterman was. You need offensive linemen that are veteran linemen that like they had out there with Bisnawadi and Dorian Johnson. I think Brian O'Neill, but he was sort of young. Alex Buxer was out there. But, I mean, they had guys that had veteran experience and talent. James Conner, obviously, the tight ends, or the tight end was Scott Orndorff. You need a certain level of precision to pull that off. And that offense had it. And I think in terms of personnel, it had the exact right offense or the exact right players to make that offense go. I don't know how Matt Canada would have done if he had stayed at Pitt for 2017. I don't know if it would have been as good in 17 as it was in 16. He wouldn't have had James Conner anymore. He wouldn't have had Nate Peterman anymore. He would have lost some of those offensive linemen. There was some rebuilding that needed to be done, and Sean Watson came into a situation where the offense was turning over a bit in 2017. So you saw the issues with quarterback with Max Brown and Ben DiNucci and ultimately Kenny Pickett taking over. You saw the issues at running back where nobody really looked good until Darren Hall in the Duke game. And you saw that they weren't really able to execute with the same precision they had in 2016. And that was a big part of it. Personnel-wise, does this year's offense, compare to 2016? I mean, they've got experience on the offensive line, but I don't know if they have the same level of talent. Is Carter Warren Adam Bisnavati? Is Gabe Hoy Brian O'Neill? I don't think so. Marcus Minor? We'll see if he's Dorian Johnson. I don't know if he's going to be. I think this offensive line has something to prove. I like this group of wide receivers a lot. I like Jordan Addison a lot. I think Taysir Mack has a role he can fill. I think Shockey Jacques Louis has not shown, his full potential. I think Jalen Barden is going to be a stud. I think, Melkis Stovall, the transfer from Hawaii that they brought in, can really fill a role. I think Will Gibson is a guy who you should keep an eye on. Been kind of held back by injuries the last 2 years, but really I think could make something happen. I like the personnel here a lot. I feel like I just need to see a little bit more out of them. But then again, in 2016, it was Jester Wea and Quadri Henderson, basically. And Henderson, mostly ran the ball as opposed to catching passes. So maybe I do give the edge at the wide receiver position. Running back, it's hard to give the edge to 2021 when you're talking about James Conner being on that 2016 team. And I don't know if anybody on this roster is, that caliber. I don't know if you put all these guys together if they're that caliber, even though Conner was a little bit slow kind of getting into the flow of things in 2016. And certainly tight end, huge advantage to Scott Orndorff in 2016 as opposed to the guys this year. Even though, again, I think there's a possibility that a guy like Lucas Krull could have a really good year, but we got to actually see it happen. So is this the best offense Narduzzi has had at Pitt? I can't say that now. Does it have the potential to be the best offense he's had at Pitt? Yeah, I guess so. They've got the potential. We'll see if they actually get there. Let's see here. Ryan Berry, has Pitt offered the East Carolina transfer Jaden Gardner? Yeah, they did. They had a Zoom call with him, I think, on Friday night. And he announced like a top 5 earlier today, top 4 or top 5, and Pitt was not in it. So that one's not happening. And then Ryan also asked, why do you think Jamie Shaw put in a prediction for Pitt? For Efton Reed, Jamie Shaw is one of our Rivals basketball analysts, Rivals.com analysts, covering basketball. And he put in a future cast, I think is what it's called, for Efton Reed to go to Pitt. I'm not sure what his rationale was behind that. I haven't gotten too many details from Jamie about why he picked Pitt for Reed. I think it's just sort of one of these gut instinct things. Pitt has been a prominent school for Reed for a while. And, it's kind of been considered the favorite for a little while. So I think probably just going off of that. Brock Madonic says, how about the Pitt baseball team? A big win today over West Virginia. Much needed win. Yeah, absolutely. They had kind of a rough series against Notre Dame over the weekend to come into the backyard brawl today and beat West Virginia. I mean, they're basically the only team in Pittsburgh that's winning today. So, it's I have to give credit to them. And, Ryan, I apologize, Ryan Wapanek. I'm not sure about your last name, but Ryan W. says Pitt's men's soccer team is number 1 in the coaches poll. Yeah, that's another big one. That's some non-football, non-basketball team success because Pitt is having, the volleyball team is in the NCAA tournament, and men's soccer ranked number 1. Baseball team, I think, still showing a lot of promise. They're still ranked, and they've just got to settle in, ride that pitching. That's what it always comes down to. Brock Madonic asks, if you were Pitt right now, what are you saying to Efton Reed to get him to Pitt? That's a great question. And I think it's always interesting to talk about recruiting pitches. I think it's always interesting. Now, look, I'll say I never got recruited to play anything, anywhere. I'm guessing the majority of the people who are watching this live stream tonight or listening to the podcast for the week probably didn't get recruited to play anything, anywhere. Maybe you did. Majority of you probably didn't, right? So we don't really know what the recruiting process sounds like. But I think if you're going to make a recruiting pitch to a guy like Efton Reed right now, if you're Pitt, coming off the season that they just had, I think you start with, Well, I was going to say you start with playing time, but the first thing you start with, what you always have to emphasize, what it always is going to come down to is relationships and trust. All right, before you get into anything about what the team can do or how much they need you or what role you can fill or how many minutes are available or anything like that, the first thing Jeff Capel has to establish, and if he hasn't established it by now, he's screwed, because I'm sure this recruitment didn't just start today. This started years ago. And what Jeff Capel has had to establish from the very beginning is that, look, Efton Reed, Jeff Capel, I am here for you, and I will be here for you. And my number one goal with you is to help you develop as a man and as a basketball player. I want you to leave this university. I want you to come to Pitt, and then I want you to leave here as a better person and a better basketball player than you were when you got here. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you in that goal. That's the only thing that matters to me, is helping you become better. And you can trust me. I'm going to support you. I'm going to have your back all the time. You do what I ask you to do, and we can do some great things together. That's where it starts, okay? That's the most important thing, particularly if you're a school like Pitt. You have to be able to recruit on trust, on the relationship, and make that bigger than anything else that you're using. Before you ever talk about the Oakland Zoo or playing in the ACC or the arena or Pittsburgh or all the museums or anything else that we talk about in recruiting pitches, attendance, and things like that. Any of those things, they're all secondary to relationships and trust. The recruit has to believe that you have his best interest at heart. The recruit has to believe that coming and playing with you and for you is going to be the best thing for his development, personally and professionally. The recruit has to believe that, because if they don't, they're not going to come to you if they have other options, because somebody else out there will convince them that it is their best opportunity. So that's number one. You recruit always on those relationships, because that can supersede records and team success and anything else. Then once you've got that established, then you start talking about roles. You start talking about how you fit into our offense. You start talking about the things we would do with you, how we would use you, what you could really accomplish here on the court. And then you tie that back into why the things if I'm Jeff Capel and I'm talking to Efton Reed, I'm going to talk about the things he could do on the court, and I'm going to tie it back in and say, look, you come and do these things, they will showcase you for the NBA. And this is where Capel can start name dropping a little bit. Look, I did this with Zion. You know what I mean? I did this with this. I did this with this guy. I did this with this. You can name drop. You can say, here's what we did with this guy, and look where it got him. I've been around Blake Griffin, and here's what we did, and look where it got him. This is what we can do together. This is what you can do. This is the opportunity you have here. And then you start talking about the opening, right? There are no other centers. You are going to come in and be the man from the start. And even if we go out and get a veteran transfer, you're still the man. And you're the man as long as you're here. And of course, that's sort of the sidebar for Capel and his staff, is that they know that even if they get Efton Reed, he's going to be here like 1 year, maybe 2. You don't count on, this is probably the reality of college basketball right now, right? You don't count on anybody being here for more than 1 year. And there'll be a lot of guys that do last more than 1 year, but you probably need to assume that you're going to face that question with everybody on your roster every offseason. And there'll be guys that don't have that conversation with you, but you should probably enter every offseason assuming you're going to have that conversation with all of them, because that's sort of reality now. So those are the things. That's how you recruit. That's how you recruit a big-time guy to your school when you haven't had a lot of success on the court. And then you can always say, look, University of Pittsburgh has had success before. University of Pittsburgh has been one of the best basketball programs in the country. You can help us get back there. Here's the pieces we've got. We've got a point guard who's going to be really good. We've got a 2 guard who averaged, whatever he averaged at Miami, finally got settled in and really took off here. We've got another guard who's going to come off the bench and drain threes all the time. We've got a wing who came to college at 17, grew up a lot last season, has gotten so much stronger this offseason. He's going to be one of the best players in the ACC. We've got potentially the guy who was the best player in the ACC coming back. What we need is a center. What we need is a guy in the middle. What we need is a 5. What we need is you. You, if you really get worked up into a lather, if you're Jeff Capel, you can eventually get around to you complete us. That's the spiel. And you can even say, look, you come in and do what we ask you to do, you will get us back to the NCAA tournament. We will go to the tournament with you on our roster. And you're not even really blowing smoke, because I kind of think if they somehow got Champagnie to come back, or if Champagnie somehow chose to come back and they also got Reed, they are a tournament team. And it would be a disappointment if they missed it, if they have those guys on the roster. And I really believe that. I think a lot of people believe that. They should, because there's talented there's talented guys on this roster coming back, and if you add those two, Champagnie and Reed, to the mix, you should have a tournament team there. So that's the recruiting pitch, I would say. I'm not sure, if it would work or not, but that's the recruiting pitch. Let's see here. All right, let's. I want to get into some of these questions from the message boards, because some people were nice enough to offer us a few conversation topics, and I want to start off. A lot of it's sort of football centric, but I think there's some football conversations to have, because I keep thinking about this season coming up. For as much as my mind is occupied on basketball recruiting and transfers and all those kinds of things, this football season coming up is really intriguing. Really intriguing, because, well, I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but there's a lot riding on this season for Pat Narduzzi. So let's talk a little football here. Zookeeper 2000 says, who's the number 2 quarterback right now? And that's a great question. We actually asked Pat Narduzzi that question today, and he said, I'm looking forward to finding out too. And it's such a big question to be answered. And it was, this spring was set up to have an even bigger question about quarterbacks, with that question being, who's the number 1 quarterback? That was the expectation when Kenny Pickett was believed to be going. Before Kenny Pickett announced that he was coming back, the expectation was that this spring would be determining who the number 1 quarterback is. So that was a huge position battle that was going to be happening. But when Pickett decided to come back, kind of like I've said before, he sort of kicked the can down the road a little bit on finding your quarterback of the future. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to get Kenny Pickett back. But you are delaying sort of finding out who that next guy is. Now, that's kind of, like I say, it's not a bad thing, but I was certainly curious to see what those guys could do. So now, instead of Davis Bevell and Joey Ellen and Nick Patty and Nate Yarnell battling for the starting job, they're battling for the backup position. Let me see. I thought there was another question in here along these lines, and so I want to... Yeah, here it is. Left Coast Panther said, would you be surprised if Davis Bevell passed Joey Ellen as Kenny Pickett's backup come this fall? So here's the thing. I think, and it's a weird thing to say because we've seen the least of him, I think Davis Bevell probably has the highest ceiling among the quarterbacks on this roster. Maybe even all the quarterbacks on this roster. Kind of including Kenny Pickett. He might have the highest ceiling if he reaches his potential. And I say that because you look at the size. He's the tallest quarterback on the roster. You look at the arm strength. I think his arm is as strong, if not stronger, than anybody else on the roster. You look at his mobility. He can run around a little bit. I don't know if he can run around as well as Kenny Pickett. Nick Patty has shown he can move a little bit too. But I think Davis Bevell can move enough to... to make plays and make things, keep a play alive and maybe even scramble for a first down every now and then. I think you look at that whole package And it's really, it's really intriguing, as intriguing as anybody else. You know, I mean, if you're comparing him directly to Yellen or Patty, I think he's got a stronger arm than either of those guys. And, you know, I think he's definitely more mobile than Yellen, and he's certainly taller and bigger than Patty. Nate Yarnell, we haven't seen anything of him. He's, coming to Pitt out of high school. But, out of the guys that we've seen, I really like Davis Beville's potential. It would not surprise me at all if Beville is the number 2 quarterback this season. Now, I think that being said, I think the number 2 quarterback this season will be sort of determined on a week-to-week basis. They'll list one guy. It'll probably, the depth chart, the official depth chart, this. It'll be Kenny Pickett, and then it'll say Davis Beville or Joey Yellen or Nick Patty. Maybe they never even seem to go in alphabetical order, but it could be like Beville or Patty or Yellen. And they're never going to actually list a number 2. You'll never really know who the backup quarterback is unless they're called upon. We didn't know who the backup quarterback was at Boston College when Kenny Pickett hurt his ankle until Joey Yellen came in. We didn't know who the backup quarterback was, the following week when they went to the Miami game. Until it turned out Kenny Pickett wasn't playing and Joey Yellen was the guy. So clearly he was the number 2. That's how we'll find out. And I think it could change week to week because it'll be based on how guys practice and how they look and their knowledge and all those kinds of who seems to have the best feel for the game plan and all that. And so we won't really know who the number 2 is. It would not surprise me at all if Davis Beville moved into that role. It would not surprise me at all if Joey Yellen moved into that role, and it really wouldn't surprise me that much if Nick Patty moved into that role. I would be surprised if Nate Yarnell moves into that role. If Nate Yarnell comes in and jumps over 3 upperclassmen to become the backup quarterback, that's great for Pitt because it speaks really well of Yarnell, but it certainly raises some questions about the other 3 guys. And probably leads to some transfers. You would think. That would be pretty likely. But as far as the backup quarterback, that's a battle I think the coaches are watching and keeping an eye on. And I think it's probably one of the more intriguing positions for the coaching staff right now. I think they've got spots where, running back, wide receiver, they're always going to rotate those positions anyway. Guys will sort of establish themselves as the top group, Vincent Davis, Jordan Addison, etc. But, they're always going to be rotating there as it is. Tight end, sort of kind of the same thing. O-line, certainly want to lock in a top 5. You know what I mean? And then set the 5 behind those guys. Defensive line, you're going to be rotating a lot. You want some guys to separate, but you're going to be rotating kind of this really throughout the defense. You're going to have a 2 deep. You're going to have guys separate themselves. And I think there'll be interesting position battles to watch at those spots, particularly like linebacker or defensive line, just because there are a lot of talented players. But I have to think for the coaches, the backup quarterback spot might be one of the most intriguing, right up there with the offensive line, trying to find out who separates themselves and just find out what you have. And one thing Pat Narduzzi's talked a lot about, he's mentioned it a few times this spring, is the fact that they really didn't have a spring last year. They got only 3 practices in. So Beville and Yellen and Patty didn't get all that extra work that they would have gotten if they had had spring camp. And he really felt like that held their development back, particularly for the youngest guy, for the young guys, Beville and Yellen. Felt like it held them back in their development, which... I'll have to take his word for that. I don't know, because we watch them on the field and we say, boy, none of these guys looks very good. And we say, well, is that a reflection on their talent? Is that a reflection on their development? Pat Narduzzi would tell you it's their development, although he didn't say they don't look very good. He just said they didn't get a chance to really develop a whole lot. Another question on the message board, Butler Pitt fan says, any word on a transfer running back? Yeah, so this was interesting. Somebody on the message board posted this week that they had a conversation with a certain Pitt coach who mentioned that Pitt was getting close to a transfer running back. Thought that was an interesting thing. We haven't really found anything so far. Digging into it a little bit. We'll keep looking around and seeing what we can find out. It's interesting to... It's the best way to say it. It's interesting that Pitt would be pursuing transfer running back. You can say what you want about Vincent Davis, say what you want about AJ Davis, say what you want about Todd Sibley, say what you want about Izzy Abanikanda, say what you want about Daniel Carter, say what you want about Rodney Hammond coming in when he gets here in the summer. Say what you want about all of those guys. And some of it would probably be true and some of it would be, exaggeration, but say what you want about all of them. And I think, I don't think any of us can deny that they've got a lot of players. We don't know how much any of them can play, but they've got a lot of them. Do they need to use a scholarship spot on a transfer running back? I guess if you get a big-time guy who can really make an impact, I guess. But I don't know. I don't see a big need for it, to be honest with you. Now, I mean, I said the same thing when they brought in DJ Turner last year, and he ended up being pretty good when he got his number called, when he got an opportunity. He made some big plays and certainly showed up. But I just don't see the need for a transfer running back. I think Vincent Davis is fine. I think Izzy Abanikanda can be really good. I think Daniel Carter can really show some things. And I think AJ Davis and Todd Sibley are two nice upperclassmen, fifth-year guys who, I'm not particularly keen on either one of them, to be honest with you, but I think they can serve a role. So I don't know if I see a need at a scholarship position to bring in a transfer running back. But we'll see what Pitt, if Pitt can get a guy, and we'll see who they are and how they are and what they can do. Machiavelli 1971 says, fill in the blank. If blank, blank, and blank, then Pitt will win 8 to 10 games this season. Well, that's a lot of blanks to fill in. So I saw this question earlier, and I tried to think about it. I was like, what would be 3 things that I would say? I mean, the only thing I could come up with, and I don't know if this would automatically correlate with an 8 to 10 win season, but the only thing I could really come up with is a 1,000-yard rusher. If you have one guy who can solidify the running back position and rush for 1,000 yards in a 12-game season, which is still less than 100 yards per game. But if you could get a 1,000-yard rusher, I really think that could work wonders for this team as a whole. Because when you look at the lack of a running game over the last couple of seasons, really, dating back to 2018, so the 2 Mark Whipple years, you look at the lack of a running game, and I think you can really sort of pick that as your center and build out to so many issues, whether it's time of possession and ball control, whether it's red zone success, whether it's just, the ability to string together drives and extended drives. So many of these things, I think you can tie at least some of it back to the lack of a running game. And so I think if you could get something established where you have one guy who could go for 1,000 yards and you got a few other guys who can chip in some here and there, I think that could go a long way in helping balance the offense, create less, I hate to say predictability, but when you throw the ball as much as Pitt does, it's kind of a given that you're going to be throwing a lot. People know that that's what you're doing. I think if you could, you could run play action better. We all understand this. A balanced offense is far more effective than a one-dimensional offense. And Pitt for the last really 3 years, if you want to go back to 2018, has been a one-dimensional offense. I don't know what they were in 2017. They were just a struggling offense with bad quarterback play. 2016, they were pretty balanced. 2015, I thought they were balanced. 2014, they had Tyler Boyd. They had James Conner running for a ton of yards, and he ran the ball a lot. Anyway, certainly the last 3 years, they've been one-dimensional. Pass heavy the last 2 seasons, and then run heavy the year before that. If you can be more balanced, I think that kind of it builds a foundation for your offense. And if your offense can be a little more effective, be a little bit better, can score a little more consistently, move the ball a little more consistently, then I think you're going to win a lot more games. I really do. That's been the thing that has held Pitt back in the last 2 seasons. You can look, a lot of the losses outside of probably, Notre Dame and Clemson this past season. maybe Miami this past season. But every other loss in the last 2 years, you can almost directly tie it to poor offensive play. You know what I mean? Say that game was lost because of the offense. And you can point to, obviously the defense didn't pitch a shutout and Pitt lost a 0-0 game. So, the defense gave up plays, but it's always been about the offense. It is all tied back to the offense. And the offense, if it's going to get better, needs more balance. Needs a lot of things. Receivers need to catch the ball. Tight ends need to be a part of the game. O-line needs to block better. Quarterback needs to put the ball on the receivers better. But I think maybe if I could pick one thing, and Machiavelli 1971 asked for 3 things, I'm going to pick one. Give me a 1,000-yard rusher. Give me a solid, consistent, effective running game to balance this offense out. And I'll give you an 8-10 win season. I think. I believe that. Let's see here. The Pit Boy asks, beyond Tyrese Fearbry, is Pitt in a good spot with any other 4 stars? If so, who? So far, we've got a lot of official visits confirmed for June for the Pitt football team. Actually, Uptown Privileges, another poster on the message board, asked how June is shaping up. There's a lot of official visits scheduled. A lot of official visits on the books, and some really good prospects, and I think Pitt's got a really good chance of landing a lot of them. I think you could see another big June recruiting boost, like we've seen the last few years when you get these guys on campus and start getting commitments out of it. No other 4-star recruits, though. Tyrese Fearbry, local kid, defensive end in the City League. Really good prospect, big-time 4-star prospect. Looks like the top recruit in Western PA this year and has the offer sheet to match, but I think Pitt's in really good shape with him. He's the only 4-star who's confirmed for an official visit so far. I think there's some 4-star talent in the group, of guys who are going to be coming to Pitt for official visits. This year is weird as far as ratings and evaluations go because of, no prospect camp space, essentially for the last year or so. And, evaluations have been a little bit harder to do, so I think some of the rankings are a little less than what they've usually been, or maybe not, maybe don't paint as clear of a picture as they have in the past. But yeah, Fearbry right now is the one 4-star that really stands out, and then it's we'll see after that. Smenges asks, with seemingly always being in close games, are there any early returns on Pitt's new starting kicker, Ben Sauls? Yeah, I assume Sauls is going to be the guy. He would seem likely. They brought him in as a scholarship kicker. I think the idea was always for him to replace Alex Kessman, and now it looks like it'll be his time. I don't know any reviews. I know he's got a big leg. I know he was really highly thought of coming out of high school. He had several scholarship offers, and if you're a kicker coming out of high school with several scholarship opportunities, then you got something going for you. You know what I mean? You're probably a pretty good player, and so I think there's a good pedigree there. I think there's a lot of potential. What happens when you get out on the field during a game? That's there's no way to simulate that. There's no way to kind of simulate that pressure and that situation, no matter how much you want to just try and be cool and calm and collected and have, nerves of steel and all that stuff. You get out there in a game, I think things change. You know what I mean? It gets a little interesting. It's a little dicey. You don't know how guys are going to respond to that. So, I think there are high expectations for Ben Sauls, but nobody knows really how you're going to do till you're out there in a game. Let's see what other questions we got here. Got a few more. Oh, yeah, I wanted to get to this. Lacey Panther said, have you heard the rumor that Western University and Carnegie Tech might consider a merger due to fiscal realities? Well, I mean, I got to be honest with you, man. I have paid less attention to Western University in recent years. After Pete Bell retired, I guess resigned is the word. I know he's still coaching. It seems like I think he's coaching youth basketball now. But after Pete Bell retired, I didn't have much interest in Western University and the scandal with paying the guys with Neon Budo and Ricky Rowe and what was the other guy's name? I forget. But there was a big scandal with the recruiting payoffs with Pete Bell and Western University, so I haven't paid as much attention to Woo Woo WU in recent years. So I can't tell you if there's any truth to the rumor that Western University, which is weird because I think they're in like L.A., might merge with Carnegie Tech. So I can't really answer that for you. So sorry about that, Lacey Panther. I don't have any answers for you on that one, but I'm glad you brought up Western University because it was fun to think about Pete Bell and his guys. That big win over Indiana, first game of the season. Last game of Pete Bell's career as a college coach, at least. Like I say, I think he's coaching youth basketball now. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody who's tuned in tonight. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All these conversations we have here, on the podcast or on Saturday morning on the Panthers Insider Show, those conversations are happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. We provide all the coverage and content of Pitt football, Pitt basketball, and Pitt recruiting, and then people go on the message boards and talk about it. The message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So go check that out anytime. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at Panther-Lair, Pantherlair, and then Home Field Apparel. Make sure you check them out. Those are our guys, and they hook us up. They support the podcast, and we appreciate them very much. They got great Pitt gear. I mean, look at that. That's just a great logo. And even, you might be like, I've got enough Pitt shirts. I can't buy any more Pitt shirts. Well, go check out their other collections. They've got stuff. I got a great Hawaii Rainbow Warriors sweatshirt. I wear that thing all the time. Not today because it was like 80 degrees today. But, they've just got stuff of schools all across the country. And it's great stuff, great logos, high quality product. You've heard my spiel before. You heard it at the beginning of the podcast. Homefieldapparel.com. You got to go check them out. I can't endorse them enough. All right. We've got the Panthers Insider Show on Saturday. I will tweet out an exact start time for that on 93.7 The Fan. I believe it's 8 a.m., but I will double check, and I will let you know. Of course, this show always, every Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. We are right here for the Panther-Lair Show. So I appreciate everybody who tuned in on Tuesday night. Appreciate everybody who listened to the podcast through the week. You guys have a great rest of the week. It was fun chatting tonight, fun having the conversation. We appreciate that. So have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. We will be right back here next Tuesday night at 8:30, the Panther-Lair Show.